And let me get started sharing my screen. Coming to y'all from Austin, Texas, where it's a little bit later. So I'm sorry I don't have a lamp set up. It kind of looks like I'm just the crypt keeper right now. 1 second while I share. Okay, is that going through for y'all? You can see, it should say running the Elastic Stack on Kubernetes. Okay. So yeah, like Rich said, my name's Anya. I work at Elastic. I'm a principal software engineer on the Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes team, or ECK, which is what I'll be talking about tonight. My hope for this session is that it's pretty interactive. I realize that's tough given this format. I wish we could be there in person, but pandemics are difficult. Feel free to ask any questions though in the Zoom chat. I think Phoebe will be moderating it so she can interrupt me. And then we'll also have a question and answer time at the end. So this is intended to be is just giving a general introduction to Kubernetes, which I'll say entirely too many. I'll be saying Kubernetes entirely too many times during this talk. So please feel, you all can turn your videos on, but just please feel free to roll your eyes every time I do, because it'll be entirely too many times. And yeah, like I said, if you want to reach me after this talk or have any questions, Phoebe dropped the link to the Elastic Slack channel, and I'm also in the Kubernetes Slack channel under the same handle, so feel free. With that, we'll get started.
Thank you, Anya. Hey, Rich, can you drop the link to your GitHub repo in the chat when you get a sec?
So this is the part where if we were in person, I'd really love to be able to ask like who here uses Kubernetes, who's running any part of the Elastic Stack on Kubernetes, and then I think importantly, who's actually doing it in production right now. But for the purposes of just going forward with this, I'm going to guess that at least one of you all are not totally familiar with Kubernetes or are not running in production. So I'll kind of give a brief overview on just what Kubernetes is, like how we see it and how we integrate with it. I think a person much smarter than me described Kubernetes as kind of a platform for building platforms. Like I came from a background of, I've worked at a bunch of different SaaS companies. And so I've kind of rebuilt the same wheels over and over. And it's really nice to have a common framework like Kubernetes to provide a bunch of the primitives that otherwise you would pretty much be building on your own at each company. So this way you can kind of focus on your different value adds. So Kubernetes provides, like I was saying, a lot of the primitives. It provides a common language and a vocabulary of specific things to talk about. And it's also worth bringing up how I wanted to go more into how we actually have integrated with Kubernetes. It was only released 5 years ago, which is nuts to think about how far it's come in that how far it's come like since then. Like going from release to being, I think, by far the most popular open source project in 5 years is crazy. Obviously having, the big corporate backers helps, but just to give you an idea of like the absolute timelines here, this has been a very short amount of time from it being released to being a mature product that lots of large companies that you heard about run things at production on, including Elastic. And then 2 years later, after it was released, we started introducing first-class support for it in versions of beats like Rich talked about, like file beat and metric beat. So it has ways to scrape metrics for how your Kubernetes infrastructure is performing, or just to scrape metrics of your application inside of Kubernetes. It has native integrations for that, and also native integrations for getting your logs from Kubernetes. So it's really common to use file beats for centralized logging if you're running a Kubernetes cluster. And just for an example of what this actually looks like, inside of Kibana, we have a infrastructure pane where you can see a lot of your Kubernetes infrastructure out of the gate. So you can see here, you have your metrics beats running. You have, in this case, an ECK operator pod, which we'll talk about more later. You can slice and dice things. So you can see their CPU usage. You can see it by the container that's running. You can see it by the namespace or the host that it's running on. So like I'm saying, you have the first-class experience. Like this is all built into Kibana. All you have to do is start it up and you already have this information available to you. And in 2018, around the same time that we added that infrastructure UI that you saw, we also joined the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is the overarching open source project that owns Kubernetes, owns a bunch of the Kubernetes ecosystem. So it's a overall like open source foundation that different projects have been donated to, like Kubernetes, and manages all of that. And in 2018, we also started dipping our toes into the orchestration of the Elastic stack on Kubernetes. So Helm charts are kind of a package manager for Kubernetes, where you see already I've said Kubernetes way too many times in the chat. We're only on like the third slide. It's only going to get worse, y'all, so buckle up. So Helm charts are like a package manager for Kubernetes, where different people can publish their packages and you can install them. So we published Helm charts for, say, Elasticsearch and Kibana, so you could just install those onto your different clusters. They're essentially big templates. And then in 2019, same year I joined Elastic, we also released the Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes, which went GA last year also. So we also offer commercial support for it, like with all the SLAs that you're used to. And the goal for Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes is that it's ECK, is that it's the preferred way for you to run Kubernetes no matter who you are. We have a free version of it. It's under the Elastic Basic license. And we also have the fancier like enterprise version of it. So we want everyone to be using a place that's designed to be by far the best way to run the Elastic stack if you're running it on Kubernetes. And some of the things that we're trying to solve when we're doing it, so like I was saying before, Kubernetes is kind of a platform for building platforms. It's not all in one, which I think is also why it's so popular, is because it provides a lot of the primitives so you can build what you need on top of it. So that's why you have a whole range of different organizations, all who use it as their underlying platform. So that way they don't have to rebuild the wheel each time, they can just rebuild what they need. So whenever you're actually deploying any given application on Kubernetes, there's a lot of those primitives that go into it. So some of the challenges is just managing and tying all those together. So a pod in Kubernetes is like the atomic unit of the containers that are needed to run a thing. So you can kind of, for a simple version, you can think of that as just one container or one instance of your application. And services are kind of like load balancers. Secrets are exactly what they sound like. They're any kind of like secret configuration or credentials. And so all these things are really common to need to deploy any application, but those are already a lot of parts that need to be orchestrated and all need to be tied together to form a cohesive whole. And then they give you the tools to be highly available. Like a lot of the native types give you the options of, how do you define, is this container up and running and it's available to receive traffic? How do when we push out a change, how do we actually roll this? How do we actually roll this out? Do we do a rolling upgrade? Is it safe to do that? Or do we need to shut everything down and then start them up again? And then kind of similar to the last point, how do you actually manage all these secrets? Like, is it tied in with some PKI? Are you running Vault? Do you need to get certs from Active Directory or something like that? There's still a lot of open questions about how you actually tie these primitives together. And same with storage here. There's the most common way, especially if you're running on a cloud provider like, say, Go, Amazon, or Azure, is using network attached storage. But then there's also the cheaper and likely faster option is local storage, but that obviously has its own problems of only being tied to that one node. So you have to handle redundancy and high availability outside of it. And then also a lot of cloud providers offer ephemeral storage on the node, which is basically scratch space that, you might lose it at any time. And that's appropriate for some use cases, but not all. So there's still a lot of thought that needs to go into how you create your storage. And then it also offers you things about namespace isolation. So it's, from the organizational perspective, you still might want to divide up teams. You still might want to divide up projects into different namespaces that don't have access to each other. So it's still a lot of thinking there of how do you isolate them? Do you even want to isolate them? So these are all the things that we were thinking about. These are a lot of the pain points for people who were deploying the Elastic Stack on Kubernetes that we were hoping to make simpler by creating ECK. So one of the ways to do that, I was saying how Kubernetes provides a lot of primitives available to you. It also offers an extension point with custom resource definitions. So it knows about some core resource types, but you can also extend it with custom resources. So in our case, it's how you can teach Kubernetes that, hey, there's also another type called Elasticsearch, or there's another type called Kibana or APM server. And so instead of deploying that long list of things I described earlier, like the pods, the secrets, the services, you can instead just say, hey, I would like a Elasticsearch cluster named my cluster. I'd like it to be running version 7.0. I want it to have 3 master nodes and 10 data nodes. And so it gives you a very nice layer of abstraction for the things that you actually care about. Now, this just tells Kubernetes about the type. So it basically just defines the schema. There's another part of ECK that needs to be deployed also that knows actually what to do with that and actually make that into reality. So that's where operators come in. You'll see that word a lot if you look around in the ecosystem. You'll see operators and you'll see controllers a lot. They're generally used interchangeably in the community. The overall definition is operators are both the combination of the controller, the actual software that's running, and the custom resource definition, which is like the schema. And so the controllers are what actually know how to turn that declarative interface where before I'm putting it the screen. It's very helpful on a screen share. It's before, but this is just the declarative interface for all you have to do is say, 3 master nodes and 10 data nodes at 7.0. The controller is what knows how to actually turn that into reality. So it lets you embed all of the best practices, all of the operator knowledge that's in your head, and make it into software that knows how to reconcile the actual state of the world with what the desired state of the world is. And does that by watching for any changes to resources that it cares about from the Kubernetes API. So anytime that you send a create request or an update request to Kubernetes, our operator is notified about it, and then it can take the appropriate action. So say if you upgraded it, it'll know how to do that. If you added data nodes, it will know how to handle that. And just take a step back, because what's come up a few times, and I think it's worth getting in front of, is so we have the Elastic Cloud, which you can look at today, which you can go to today if you go to cloud.elastic.co, which is our SaaS, where you don't even have to worry about it. It's a similar experience where you just would like a Elasticsearch or a Kibana or any other Elastic Stack resource, and we just manage it for you. We also offer an on-prem version of the same service called Elastic Cloud Enterprise, where you can run the same software that we use to run the Elastic Cloud SaaS on-prem, which is helpful for a lot of people. And this is different from ECK in the sense that it's a whole SaaS environment. So it includes a UI, So it includes both a customer UI and an admin UI, so you can manage the whole environment. It includes its own API that you can contact, and a bunch of other nice to have features that tie it all together. One second. And right now, both can run on all the three big public cloud providers like Azure and Google and AWS. It's in 22 regions, and importantly, this was created even before Kubernetes existed. Remember, we were saying it only came out in 2015. Elastic Cloud has been around for more than 7 years. So a lot of the orchestration things behind the scenes are not using Kubernetes today. But we created ECK with the idea that we eventually will swap out the orchestration layer to use Kubernetes. So that's one of the many use cases we had in mind where creating ECK is that you can use it to create your own SaaS, kind of like we are planning on doing, like using for our Elastic Cloud. And so this brings us to the overall overview for Elastic Cloud and Kubernetes for ECK. As I mentioned, it'll bring Elasticsearch, Kibana, and APM server today. We support a lot of the same platforms that Elastic Cloud does, so you can run it on all of the hosted Kubernetes platforms on those big cloud providers. Like Azure has AKS, AWS has EKS, Google has GKE. You can also run it on your own Kubernetes that you installed yourself, either on-prem or on the cloud, and you can also use Red Hat's OpenShift. And instead of having our own API, because we're just using the native extension points that are built into Kubernetes, you can just use the native Kubernetes API, all the tooling that you're already using to manage everything else in your Kubernetes environment, you can use also to manage your Elasticsearch resources that we added. So kubectls, the main extension point that most people will use, and we'll see here in a second, or not the extension point, the main command line the command line tool that people will use. And yet you'll still use that same thing that you're using to interact with everything else in Kubernetes. You'll use that to interact with Elasticsearch as well. You can also deploy, right now, and we'll have a demo in a little bit, we're only going to deploy one cluster. You can do dozens, you can do hundreds. We've tested thousands. You start running into issues with just Kubernetes limits with things timing out before you run into any problems with us. You can run a ridiculous amount of clusters with it if you want. And one of the really nice things I think you get out of the box using ECK is that no one wants to be those people in the news who are talking about, no one wants to be those people in the news who had their Elasticsearch instance owned because they didn't have security configured or didn't have TLS configured. We can figure that out of the box for you, so you don't even have to worry about it. Just out of the gate, with no extra configuration, we automatically generate a CA and certificates for all the nodes for them to use and have authentication turned on by default. And for more advanced uses, you can also enable SAML. We can use certificates that you provide if you have your own PKI system. All of that's possible too. But the quick start also just works right out of the gate. Like I was saying, it has all of the operator knowledge. It knows how to handle all of the all of the stuff that you might have an ops team to handle. All of that knowledge is just built into the software, so you can scale up or down and do rolling upgrades all seamlessly without having to worry about how it's actually performed. ECK will automatically do it safely for you without any downtime or data loss. So it'll take all the appropriate steps. And while it's really easy to have a quick start experience, we try to strike a balance to where the quick start's really easy and simple, which is like what we were showing before, but we also wanted to make it at least make it possible, if not easy, to have more advanced topologies too. So if you wanted to say have hot, warm, and cold tiers, so that way you can take advantage of cost differences for your more frequently to less frequently accessed data, We wanted to enable that. It's also best practice to have things like dedicated masters or dedicated ingest and machine learning nodes. We wanted to enable things like that too. So all that's possible, and we use it internally a lot for topologies that look exactly like that. And as promised, we'll have a live demo, which we'll see how that goes. So we'll go ahead and start it now. What I wanted to do was give the example quick start. Let me see if I can remember how to talk and share a screen at the same time. So here I have my terminal up, and you can see we were talking about how kubectl before was just using the native thing. So the kubectl is the native command line interface to interact with Kubernetes. And you can see right now, we're just trying to list all of the Elasticsearch and Kibana instances out of the gate. So it's the same technology you'd already be using. It's just telling Kubernetes about new types like that. And so this is just this, yeah.
I'm sorry. Is it possible for you to increase your screen size just a little bit?
Let me see.
Without losing your stuff on your screen.
Okay, I can do it per tab.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No, that was a good point. I should have considered that sooner. Is that legible now or no?
Yeah, that's better. Definitely.
Okay. If it's not, I mean, I can do it more. Sorry, but
no,
this is
I think it's all
should have run through in the test.
Yep. Go for it.
Okay. So this is just me straight up copy and pasting from our quick start. So you can see before, this is just applying the Elasticsearch quick start like what I was showing earlier. So this will start creating it. And then once this is done, we'll see it pop up here in the bottom left pane. And then similar, if we deploy Kibana, and you can, it's kind of wrapping around, but you can see already the Elastic operator has started applying changes to it, and it's starting to create it. And then similarly, I just added the Kibana quick start, which we'll also see pop up. And so now the Kibana is showing up there. And as I was mentioning before, pods are kind of the smallest unit in Kubernetes. It's a group of containers that all need to run together and share a namespace. See, we can see that right now the quick start Elasticsearch is starting, but it's not quite there yet. Oh, but it's ready, and now the health of it's green, and that's turned ready. So now we're just waiting on the Kibana to start, just taking some time. It can sometimes take a second. If the node doesn't have the image downloaded already, it'll need to do that. So as promised in the chat, as we got to wait for Kibana to start during Rich's demo, again, we get to wait for Kibana to start in mine. So feel free to, refresh your drink. Shouldn't be too long now. And Phoebe, there haven't been any questions in the chat, have there?
There's one in there right now.
Yeah, go for it. We've got another person who's not able to see the screen.
Oh no.
Getting audio. So we had that problem with somebody else, and they just hopped out of Zoom and rejoined. So Kishore, I might try that. But there was a question about installing elk with Helm charts, like having issues with that. I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to about that we threw in some links in there.
Okay.
Henry
I'll wait till the end to address that.
Okay, perfect.
I'll need to read it, I think, but yeah, we'll get to it. So yeah, we can see on the bottom left-hand pane here how, okay, cool. Elasticsearch is green, Kibana is green. If we look at the list of pods, we can see that all of them are ready and running. So it looks like everything's good here. So all I'm going to do now is, just for the sake of the demo, I'll open up a port forwarding connection so that my local machine can connect to Kibana running inside the cluster. You would normally go through some extra steps to do this, but for development or test purposes, this is how you would normally do it. So we'll start that. And then from there, we'll switch to Kibana.
What's wrong? Too many tabs?
Too many tabs. Too many tabs. Well, it's just too many windows because I was trying to find the right one. Okay. And because it's using a self-signed cert right now, as I was saying, it'll automatically create, when you don't provide it any information, it'll automatically create a self-signed certificate authority and also issue certificates for them. You can issue it, you can give it certificates yourself. We have a lot of docs on how to do that if you have that set up. But this way you at least have certificates set up out of the gate that you can use. And then I got the password from one of the secrets out in my terminal. I should have shared that. And so now we're already talking to the Kibana running inside of the Kubernetes cluster. Like that was the entirety of the information you had to do was about 20 lines of YAML to create it. And it's up and running. That's the end of the quick start demo. So you should be able to do the same yourself. We try to make the quick start as easy as possible. And we're also available both on the Discuss forums and on the Elastic Slack channels. Let me go back to sharing the presentation again. Okay, can you see this slide that says roadmap? Maybe you're rich. Okay, cool.
I can see it.
Yeah, okay. So what we have coming up, I'm really excited about our 1.2 release. As mentioned, we went GA at the end of last year, and we've released new minor releases roughly every 3 months so far. And the new one will be 1.2, and I'm really excited about it. It introduces 2 new types. Like I was saying, we have Elasticsearch and Kibana and APM as their own first-class types right now. The 1.2 release will introduce 2 new ones in beta. It will release beats, so you can create, like I was showing in the slides before, how you can use file beat and metric beat to monitor all of your Elasticsearch, to monitor all of your Kubernetes pods logs, and how you can monitor your Kubernetes nodes metrics and your applications metrics. This gives you a much easier way to actually deploy all that and hook everything together. So it'll be a similar experience to what I just showed you, where you can just copy and paste, a few lines of YAML, and you'll automatically have beats deployed and monitoring your Kubernetes cluster. And the other, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Anya, we do have a question in the chat when you have a second. Peter asks, does that mean we have to set up NFS local file system linking that can migrate with pods being restarted on different hosts?
It depends on how you want to do it. So that kind of gets to, do you use network attached storage or do you use local storage, if I'm understanding the question correctly?
Yeah, Peter, feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly.
Hi, thank you. I play with Kubernetes, and one of the main problems I've had with on-prem Kubernetes, not Cloud, because Cloud you can always specify a storage blob. But the on-prem, there's no easy IDs to reattach a pod to its own local data, especially if it dies and you have to restart it. So the persistent store is a problem that I'm trying to solve. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're definitely right. It can be challenging in on-prem if you don't have some kind of network storage available to you. Operationally, it's a lot easier if you do have network storage, because like you said, you don't have to worry about where does this pod spin up. As long as it's still attached to the same network storage, it can spin up on there. It's definitely possible to use local. The phrasing you'll be looking for is like local persistent volumes, and there's definitely room for improvement on that front, but it's definitely possible to do it, and we use it right now in our CI testing. All uses local SSDs because they're a lot faster, but it definitely carries extra operational burden because, as you mentioned, if the node goes down, then that pod can't start again because it needs the storage that's on that node. So that's definitely hard on-prem. It's still
right, and also
around
the NAS and network storage has a performance penalty relative to I/O bandwidth for Elasticsearch.
Yeah, yeah, it does. In our testing and in our real-world usage, a lot of the cloud, at least the cloud providers, offer really like well-performing network-attached storage to the point where, we run our internal security cluster in taking like multiple terabytes a day off of just network attached storage because it's so much easier to operate, and the performance is obviously it could be better if it was all on local like NVMe disks, but it's still good enough for even a pretty heavy use case like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that we get a lot. If you want to discuss it more, I'm definitely down to talk about it more, either at the end of this presentation or if you want to bring it to our Slack channel or something.
So we have another question in the Q&A. Mehmet asks, what is the major difference between Elk Stack with Helm deployment and ECK on K8s?
It's a great question. I think ECK is much more aligned for quote unquote like day two operations. So the Helm charts work great when you just want to deploy it. Where I think ECK really begins to shine is when you want to make changes to it, because Helm doesn't have any knowledge of, it can only apply resource changes. It can't do any kind of orchestration change. It doesn't have any kind of like processing power. So say if you want to add more master nodes, there are some steps you want to do to make sure that you're not adding too many at a time, and same with downscaling them. If you want to upgrade the version of Elasticsearch, there's some specific steps you'll want to take that ECK can do, but Helm just isn't built to be able to do, because it's essentially like a glorified templating engine. So it works great for deploying it in the first place. Where ECK really shines is in making changes to it down the line. Or if, say, you want to upgrade your storage, ECK has a way for it to spin up new storage and migrate over to it, which just wouldn't be possible using Helm charts. Are there any other questions about that, Phoebe? Maybe you're still muted.
Oh, sorry. I keep doing that. That looks like it is it.
Okay.
Now.
And yeah, y'all feel free to unmute. Like if you have follow-up questions, again, like feel free to unmute too, and we can discuss. I mean, this is also near the end of the presentation, but we'll have time at the end also if we have any more. So going back to the roadmap, I already went down Beats, and at least why I personally am excited about that launching. The other Stack product that we'll be launching support for is Enterprise Search, which is a combination of both workplace search, and app search. Workplace search, if you're unfamiliar, is, I think it's awesome. We have an instance of it launched internally. It essentially is an aggregator of all of your different data sources. So in my case, the relevant ones are, we use Confluence for our wiki. We have a bunch of information in GitHub. We have a bunch of information in Google Docs. Being able to search all of those from one place really fast is it's so good. Getting all those results, and also not having to deal with GitHub search. No shade, but this is just better than GitHub search for me. So maybe some shade. And that also includes app search, which is useful for integrating pretty much exactly what it sounds like, integrating search functionality into your app. So both of those will be launching in beta in the next few weeks whenever we release 1.2. And looking forward past that, mid to long-term future, what we hope to be doing is making both of those stable. That'll be the first public release, and it'll be in beta. We also might consider adding additional Kubernetes distributions. Right now, we support the three biggest cloud providers hosted solutions, Azure, Google, and AWS. And we also support OpenShift and quote unquote vanilla Kubernetes, which maybe you installed yourself with KubeSpray or some other mechanism. But there's a lot of Kubernetes distributions out there that have real usage, so having formal support for that would be useful. Another thing that we're excited about adding is having a better auto-scaling story. Right now, you can update your Elasticsearch YAML, like we were talking about earlier, to either add more nodes to scale out, or add more resources, either adding more storage or adding more RAM or more CPU. You can do all that, but there's not a great way to do it automatically. So what we're really hoping for is to make that story better. There's still ways, given those primitives, there's obviously ways you can build your own auto-scaling logic on top of that, but there's nothing out of the box right now. And so that's something both us, the ECK team, and the Elasticsearch core team are working on. How can we solve this together and make good scaling decisions based on the knowledge that Elasticsearch has and what ECK can actually do. And similar to like we have in our Elasticsearch Cloud, to our Elastic Cloud product, the SaaS service you get when you go to cloud.elastic.co, it'd be really cool to have some kind of dedicated UI, or maybe a nicer API experience like wrapped on top of it. Like I said, we tried to build ECK so it can be the foundation of building your own SaaS and also running it as a customer in your own data center. So this is one of the things that enables is we can build things like an extra UI or an API on top of it, maybe with like better RBAC experience, or maybe with some extra like admin capabilities inside of Elasticsearch. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. And we try to be really accessible. So you can go to this top link, elastic.co/product/ECK, and that'll just take you to the general product page. Also, all of our code is on GitHub. We welcome issues, we welcome pull requests. Everything that I talked about is all visible here. We're also very active on our Discuss forums. So if you have any kind of more like, how do I do this kind of question, the Discuss forums are a great place for that, and you'll probably get a response from like one of the team members. We're pretty active on it. And then we're also active on the Elastic Slack. There's a #Kubernetes channel that we're in, and a lot of our outside community members are in. So you have a lot of options for getting a hold of us. It's like we're stoked about this product. We're stoked about people using the product. So please feel free to contact us if you have questions. We tried to make our docs really useful and comprehensive. If you find places, that's definitely something we're interested in improving. If you find rough edges actually using it, all that's feedback that we're really interested in, and I hope you feel comfortable sharing. And that's it for me. Like I said, my name's Anya. You can find me at Sabo in both the Elastic and Kubernetes Slacks. And thanks so much for your time, y'all. Sad that we couldn't do this in person. One of my favorite parts is normally, talking to people before and after the meetups. So I'm sorry we couldn't do it. Hopefully I'll be out to LA at some point. I don't think leaving Texas is a great idea right now, just for your all's sake. So I'll stay right here. But yeah, we can open it up to questions, or
I'm holding you to your visit. When you come out to LA, I'm holding you to it.
Yeah. No, it's I had plans.
One question for so the Kubernetes beats, is that for what's the difference between the normal beats? Will it be the
so it's not a different beat. It lets you deploy beats on Kubernetes easily.
Okay.
So it lets you deploy it lets you deploy file beat and metric beat like just on Kubernetes without you having to read a whole bunch of docs on like, how the heck do I put this together?
All right, so you'll have like a quick start for beats like you did for
Exactly.
Kibana?
Exactly.
Okay. And it'd be the same versions as normal, right? Most likely.
Yeah. So right now, our main like hard dependency is that we need XPack to be available. So we support essentially like 6.8 and up and 7.1 and up. Ooh, and that's the other fun thing that I didn't pitch, is that we can also do smooth upgrades between like 6.8 and 7 without you having to worry about it. Like, we'll handle all of the upgrading business. And that'll also be true from going from 7 to 8.
Thanks, Anya, for presenting. Quick question. Yeah. You mentioned the beats integration. Is there, I know Fleet just came out, the Elastic agent just came out.
Yeah.
And experimental. Are you, can you say anything about that?
I can. It's really cool. And it runs beats under the hood. So what we'll probably end up doing is having another type to enable Fleet, to run the Elastic agent that's launching. That's still something that's being fleshed out. We have been working on beats for about the same. We've been working on releasing beats because it's a thing that already exists, and it'll be, because we support back to 6.8, we needed a story for that. So where Elastic Agent and Fleet will be mostly running on future versions. Does that answer your question? Like, yes, we'll have a better story for Fleet in the near future.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the story was for Fleet and Kubernetes, but yeah, hopefully they'll be just coming online. For people who don't know what Fleet is, it's essentially a way of managing and deploying your agents across any host.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the challenges there is that a lot of the Kubernetes way of looking at things is having the declarative configuration in one place. So one of the things that we're kind of working with is, okay, how do we intermix whatever your definitions in Kubernetes config are versus whatever you might do through like the Fleet user interface, if that makes sense. So like, say you deploy Fleet in one place at 7.8 and then you hit the upgrade button in the Fleet UI to upgrade to 7.9, like what happens? So there's still like a lot of, there's still work we need to do to figure out like exactly how we mesh these things together.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of work involved. And
yeah, we're really excited. Yeah, it was hard because, like they're focused on getting it out the door, but yeah, the plan is definitely to have a better story about it. It's just to be determined at this time. But yeah, it's definitely a really cool product and something that like obviously has a lot of value both like inside and outside of Kubernetes.
Thanks, Anya.
Cool. Any more questions? I think that's, if not, we can do the wrap up. So Anya, thank you very much for presenting, and thanks everyone for joining the first virtual meetup. Very different. I'm usually like to be in front of people too, and like instead I'm talking to my computer screen. But like I said, we're going to have another meetup this month. We're planning on a lunchtime meetup, so lunchtime Pacific time at noon on July 29th. We're going to have Philip Kren. Like I said, he's one of the developer advocates for Elastic Europe. He lives out of Vienna. He's a fun speaker to listen to, and he's very creative on his presentations. So we're really looking forward to that. We'll be announcing that probably tomorrow or end of this week. We'll get that out. And hopefully, you know, you guys, everyone got something out of this. We some more information. I think we had a bunch of links. I put all the links I had from my slides inside the chat. And I'll hand it over to Phoebe to kind of wrap it up a little bit too.
Yep. Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much, Anya. Thank you to everybody who came to the meetup. We had a great turnout. Like Rich said, we put a lot of links in the Slack, but don't worry if you didn't have time to grab them out of the, I'm sorry, not the Slack, but the chat. But if you didn't get a chance to grab them out, then we'll be sending out a follow-up email with all these resources, and then also the link to the video once we've had a chance to edit it and clean it up a little bit. So look for that in your emails. If you didn't RSVP for this event, you won't get the email, but I'll post it to the discussion board for this meetup. So hopefully you'll be able to locate it. And yeah, so just encourage you to join our virtual meetup group on the Elastic website. The Americas virtual meetup group has all kinds of virtual events happening. We do multiple events per week, and you'll have access to meetups that are happening on the East Coast. We try and do time zone friendly, so be sure to check that out. And that is it for me.
Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel too. There's almost a new video every day or every other day. There's a new one. So hit that subscribe button.
Alrighty. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.